Live on Twitch already.
Hi everyone, we are live. I'm Colombe, this is Andrea, and we are the co-founders of Atlas. Andrea, say hello and tell us what Atlas is.
I can say hello, thanks. So my name is Andrea. Hello everybody. It's great to be here. And to the question what Atlas is. Atlas is a global movement bringing together humankind. We started this adventure 2 years ago. We're present now in more than 130 countries. We're more than 20,000 people supporting our work. And we are doing this live as we are trying to imagine how we could bring together people physically and mentally and politically. Because the big problem nowadays is the nation states are causing a lot of pain across the planet, and they're not cooperating. And we see it in the realm of climate change, we see in the realm of taxation, lots of problems. And so we started this broadcast to explore solutions with all of you. Am I right, Colombe?
So Atlas is a global movement working to create a global governance, and this broadcast is aimed at exploring how to build a global country with you all. We've covered a lot of topics from how to build a country, borders, currencies, the issues and successes of current intergovernmental organizations like the United Nations. We looked at how space exploration and fiscal justice need a democratic global governance in order to be able to move forward as one. We looked at revolutions and how they are brought about. What are some of the lessons we can use to understand how a peaceful revolution can create a global governance? And this week, we're looking at something really cool. So I have to admit before saying it that I've just spent an hour going on a rabbit hole of the topic on the internet. But we're looking at new types of nations. And for this, I mean, we look at micronations, digital states, and other really weird experiments. And the reason for which we're looking at really weird experiments is our idea of building a global democratic country, a global democratic governance is really weird. So we thought, it's true, it's needed, but it's a weird endeavor. And so we thought, let's look at it. Today we'll look at micronations. Tomorrow we'll look at digital countries and how they exist. So we'll look at less weird experiments. We'll look at stuff like Estonia, Taiwan, and so on, before continuing to move on. But let's quickly recap why we're looking at micronations. So as Andrea mentioned in his introduction, why are you laughing?
I don't know, because you clearly didn't like my introduction. It was unclear.
That's very unclear.
Sorry, I was still thinking about micronations, so I got maybe tangled up in
So
my
let
thought.
me redo it.
Go for it.
As Andrea explained in his unclear introduction, we are trying to build a global democratic country. And for this, in 2023, we'll be running consultations all across the world to crowdsource from you, from people, what type of democratic global governance we need, what type of democracy we want. We need to innovate democracy as we know it. So how do we want it to happen? And so on and so forth. And as a result, we are trying to understand a bit what's out there. Because after the consultations, we'll run a campaign for the UN Secretary General to try to get the UN Secretary General that believes in a democratic global governance. And after this, we'll build ourselves this global democratic country if the UN refuses us. So micronations are very, very relevant. Before I get started, because I spent way too much time looking at super specific examples that are completely irrelevant because they're basically type of empires that are really undemocratic and unhealthy. But before I get started talking about my research, Andrea, what do you understand by micronations?
So the name itself is just give me the vibe of a very small country. So that could be Vatican City or San Marino. But I know because I also looked in these topics in the past.
Because you're looking at my notes.
No, but also your notes. But I looked in the past at this topic. It's not like you're the first researcher in this space. With micronation, we normally indicate very small entities that are being created with the purpose of challenging normally the status quo and the traditional notion of states. Am I right, Carl?
So and so. So let me read the Wikipedia definitions.
Go for it.
Micronations, sometimes also referred to as model countries and new country projects, as small self-proclaimed entities that claim to be independent sovereign states, but which are not acknowledged as such by any recognized sovereign state or supranational organization. So basically, they say they're countries, but they're not. Or they're not recognized as by established countries. And they should not be confused with microstates, which is what you were saying, and they are like Liechtenstein or Vatican City or stuff like this, because those are very small, but they are recognized, right?
Yeah.
So there are different motivations to create micronations. Some of them have experimentation, some of them are out of political protest, some of them are for artistic reasons, and then there's some weird personal ones around weird political ideas. And some of them are for the pursuit of criminal activities.
Okay.
So those are the type of micronations, and some of them have really cool features, I think. I started designing coins and songs during my research around issuing coins, flags, passports, medals. There's some you can buy online, some titles such as being a baron or a baroness of some really weird small micronations.
That's very cool.
It's quite expensive, but yeah. As some source of revenue. Do you know of any micronation?
I know of the micronation of the Rose Island.
So tell us about the Rose Island.
I know because it happened in front of Italy, where I'm from, and also because there was a famous Netflix movie about it. And it's basically an engineer from Bologna, the city in Italy, decided to start a platform, to build a platform in the international waters, just like half an hour from the coast of Italy, even less. They started more as, I think, as an experiment, but then it developed a lot in terms of like international attention. They even claimed sovereignty in front of the Council of Europe. That actually was inclined to listen to their case and was advancing their case. And basically it became also a party island, to be honest. So like kind of an open air casino where people would go and party during the summer.
But they had like passports. I mean, they issued passports, they had a currency and so on, right?
Yeah, they did the whole thing. I think it lasted a couple of years. And then against international law, to be fair, the Italian Navy, I think, removed the people and destroyed it. So it stopped the experiment. But I think that it was a wonderful idea in terms of like challenging status quo. And I think, for example, nowadays it would be way more difficult for Italy to do so because of social media, and so on. It would actually cause a way stronger uprising to try to destroy such a project.
Yeah, some people just have to be willing to go and live on a random platform at sea, which a lot of people are willing to do nowadays, as we will get to with my examples. So if you Google micronations, very good example, congratulations on there.
Thank you.
I
add value.
If you Google micronations, there's like 69 results. But again, it's a super low barrier for entry. From the moment you say you're a micronations, you can have a. There's some, but because it's not recognized by any institution or anything, right? So there's no standards. There's some biannual conventions of micronations in different microstates. I'll pass on it. Not super interesting. You have micronations that are basically a random person say, I'm giving a random example, but it's a few micronations function this way. Oh, there's this platform that is unclaimed in the sea that was probably previously used for military purposes or whatever. There's one off international waters off the coast of the UK like this. I'm going to claim that it's a nation. And I'm going to be the emperor and whatever. So you have a few of those examples of people building platforms on the sea and being like, I'm the emperor. There was a trend, I think, around the 70s for libertarian purposes. So it was like very little, the idea was we're going to build those micronations with very little state involvement, super low taxes, and so on and so forth. I don't really like this in general. I believe you need a very strong social net in society for the most vulnerable not to be left behind. But again, interesting political experiments. You also had some people that claimed that their flat was a micronation and just sent random ambassadors around. Whatever. Like, there's a lot of those examples. So I'm just passing some. Some built rifts that were destroyed during hurricanes and so on. You have a really weird example on the internet of this dude in the middle of the US that built a micronation explaining that because of East Germany, the sleep deprivation, or something like this. I just sent it to my sister because I was laughing so much reading it. Um, and yeah, it's not worth mentioning. So you have a lot of
No, it's not the right example.
so you have a lot of really weird cases. But I think the reason for which I wanted to do an episode on Micronation is not to talk about those weird one-off cases. It's to talk about what I think could be interesting for a global digital country, because a global democratic country, a global democratic country can be digital. It can have digital services such as health services and so on and so forth. To provide to its citizens. I think, to have a real democratic governance, you need to have strong state services that are digital. But having physical infrastructure is important to be able to be linked to citizens, to be able to go beyond the internet divide, and so on and so forth. So looking at how micronations grow or not, and how they fail or not, is quite interesting.
Okay.
And there are two that I thought were interesting. One of the first one is the Empire of Atlantium.
Which is already a very interesting name.
I know, right? And let me read you the history, if my phone accepts to collaborate. So the Empire of Atlantium, the reason for which I took it is because it's not yet another group that basically wants no taxation. I find it interesting. It was created, I think, by a few students in Australia out of a flat, and then they bought a bigger property, and it has a bigger property. But the idea is that it has progressively liberal policies, and it's characterized as a secular humanist utopia. So, for example, they support rights and unrestricted international freedom of movement, right to abortion, right to assisted suicide, and so on. And it has almost 3,000 citizens, although most of them have never made it to Atlantium. It's a flat in Australia. But again, I found the whole thing quite interesting because, for example, they have managed to raise some funds by taking a percentage of the coin that they have. They issue passports for a fee. You can become a citizen, then it stopped operations to become a citizen, then it reopened it, and so on. But theoretically, if it was really well done, I'm saying if, but I've never done it. But the idea of having state services that could be funded through coins and passport applications and so on is quite interesting.
It is. It's very interesting. And I think that it's a very interesting model, especially now that we have a digital world. So obviously, a lot of these cases are either older. This one, is current, so they already leverage the fact that people can donate all over the planet. But I think there is also the flip of the coin. They can also start providing services across the planet. So not only fundraising, which is very important for any state entity, but also, for example, supporting with health services, as you mentioned before, or other functions. So I think these are the kind of things that we should think about right now as we imagine whether we could take some of the features of this micronation and transfer them in the concept we have.
Yeah. And I think I just want to give one of examples. So I mean that this example, again, there's no micronation that functions well when it comes to services that it offers. You can live there in some cases. Sometimes it's on undisputed territories. Sometimes it's on unclaimed territories and so on. So you can live there. You can create weird rules. Often you'll be blocked off the face of the earth. Basically, you have tax issues with other countries. But you can do that. But it doesn't really provide, even though they often have citizens outside of their micronation, it doesn't really provide real services, as you mentioned. So I think that's one of the things of micronation. I like the idea of challenging state sovereignty as we know it, because as we discussed in episode 1 of this show, countries have created a lot of issues. With borders, they have created a lot of issues, a lot of wars, a lot of conflicts, a lot of discrimination, and so on. So the idea of a nation, not necessarily micro, we'll talk tomorrow about digital states, but the idea of a nation challenging the current way we see countries, states, etc., whether it's linked to sovereignty of a territory or not, I think, again, having some type of physical presence, on-the-ground presence is important. So that's why I'm looking at micronations.
Mm-hmm.
Is really interesting, but then it has to be coupled with real services. It has to be coupled with something for citizens to have a reason to join this. Whether, for example, it's the distribution of a universal basic income through voluntary taxation or something like this. I don't know. But it has to be coupled. The second example I wanted to give of a micronation, which is a bit different, I thought was super interesting, is the Glacier Republic. And I find it very interesting because for me, it's a great way of challenging governments to do better for our common good. So let me qualify. The Glacier Republic is a fake micronation that was created as an ad campaign by Greenpeace Chile. So Greenpeace Chile basically said, look, Greenpeace Chile is supposed to protect glaciers from environmental damages and so on. And they promised that they would do it. And Chile contains 82% of South America's glaciers, so it's super important to protect them. But there's no adequate regulation to do so. So right now, glaciers are being endangered. So Greenpeace Chile said, enough is enough. We're going to create Glacier Republic, a micronation, with the aim of protecting glaciers in Chile. We don't aim at having sovereignty on the long term. We don't want sovereignty on the long term. We will return the glaciers when there are adequate protections in place. And so again, it's fake. Like, it's not like they actually have a republic there and so on and so forth. But it's really interesting. It's basically the idea, for me, this is closer as well to us in a way.
Yeah.
It's basically the idea of, look, this is a common good. Glaciers are important for the planet. And also the destruction is really harmful. They're not being protected. Us, citizens of the world, and I'm saying citizens of the world because I think it's like 3,000 or 4,000 people signed up to be...
More, I think today 40,000.
Oh yeah, 40,000 people signed up, to become citizens of the Republic, which opened embassies in 40 countries across the world. So basically where Greenpeace has offices, which is really cool. So 40,000 people said, yeah, we'll be citizens of this. We'll have a dual citizenship of, for example, France and Glacier Republic. And because it's a common good, and if they are protected, then we give it back. We don't really care about having this land or whatever.
Very cool experiment. I tried to Google whether it was still active, but I didn't find much.
I have to admit that I went on the rabbit hole of Micronations and reading too many of the websites, so I didn't have time to do more in-depth research.
But I think it's a wonderful example. I think it's actually very powerful. I think it's something that symbolizes the power of thinking beyond lines and also of coming together because of the fact that Greenpeace started this campaign, actually thousands more people started caring about the glaciers in Chile. There is something that normally would not do. And hopefully, I Googled, so I do not know the outcome of the experiments. If someone following or watching this video later can tell us, would be amazing. I did not find the outcome, but I think that even if they only delayed some mispractices on the glacier, or probably they attract international attention, so way less bad stuff happened there, it's a success. So these are the kind of like sovereignty examples we should look at.
Yeah, and I think it also goes to a more philosophical level, like why would it's something we talked about on countries and the existence of countries in the first place. Like, absolute sovereignty over a territory is something really weird. It's not like a country can be able to do whatever they want to a territory. It's not like your human value has less value in one country or another. Like, it makes no sense, right? Yet in some countries, I have less rights because I'm a woman. And because I would be a citizen of that country, I would have less value because I have less right now. Like, there are certain minimum requirements that we share as humanity. We share this planet. We are the same. So the countries don't make sense on so many levels, from a pure value perspective to an environmental perspective. Like, we saw it with Brazil and the Amazon forest, right? Like, Brazil destroying it destroys the lungs of the planet. It impacts us all. Yet an insane former president gets to destroy it. Like, it makes no sense. The sovereignty aspect, in general, sovereignty makes very little sense to me. But on a purely logical basis, the sovereignty aspect means we're going to die of horrible climate change.
Yeah.
Like, this is a bit stupid.
A bit.
No, but like, it makes no sense. It's really dumb. Like, so that's when I really like the Greenpeace Glacier Republic example. Is it's not because a country has proclaimed sovereignty, which again, weird, over a piece of land, that suddenly we should let glaciers rise the ocean levels. So saying, no, we don't accept unless, and you don't get back sovereignty unless you do what's right, is a really cool example.
I fully agree. So I think these are great models. And in your research column, do you find any nation that was really more successful than others? Any micronation that was more successful than others?
They were not really successful. There were some weird experiments, to be honest. Some of them drew more attention, but like in general, it's not done for. There's very few that are done for humanist outcomes, right? It's like we should not pay taxes, or we have whatever and so on. But like, or you have some that are allowed to exist because they bring tourism, like the one in Copenhagen and so on and so forth.
Okay.
But it's not like one is prospering. Otherwise, if they really had a lot of attention, they would probably become states, right, and not just nations.
So do you think this is the right way for us to try to create something that can become a state, or is misguided and not the...
I don't think having it linked to territory is necessarily the best thing, because as we've seen, a lot of issues with countries are linked to their territorial claims. I am French, but that means that others aren't. It's to the exclusion of others. And the truth is, in any nation, however big, you can't welcome everyone. So not everyone can be one thing if it's linked to territory, right? I think we already have this fight over territory all over the world. It's not necessarily needed to add more. I think, again, having representative offices and so on for any concept is needed to be able to talk to people, to be able to bring them in, to be able to offer certain services. However, I don't think that micronations, in the sense of claiming territory, it creates more divisions often. I'm not saying they're doing something wrong. I think they're pushing the boundaries of how we understand countries, which is really interesting and must be done. At a global stage, at a global scale, I don't think it's what's really needed. Just because you can't welcome the whole world in a micronation.
Okay. So what we take home in terms of like positive examples coming from the micronation topic is that they challenge status quo. There are actually lots of people that are not interested in this thing. Like even the most random empire gets thousands of citizens. So there are people across the planet that do not feel represented, or more they might want to be included in something else that right now does not ensure inclusion. And I think that it's very impressive also to see the variety of micronation that happen, from like a cause to defend the glacier to like a mad person wants to become emperor to a claim of freedom. So there are a lot of different experiments that were created and existed for quite some time that show that it's possible.
Yeah, and I think if you coupled some of the thinking, for example, of Greenpeace with like cutting edge tech infrastructures that enable the delivery of very good services, or unable to facilitate some sort of activities that are normally performed by states but are difficult because of admin and so on, then you might actually really create something global. I think the issue with something like the UN and so on, apart from the fact that it's undemocratic, that it doesn't have competencies and comes deal with global challenges, is the fact that it feels very remote, because it deals with huge challenges that are very remote. So I think a global democratic country needs to have a link with citizens. It is needed to administer those challenges, but a link with citizens that is more close to people's daily needs. And I think that's what's cool with Micronation, is it's really close because it's so small. So finding a way to directly, I don't know whether it's like, ID verification or providing IDs or backgrounds or whatever, so that you can get visas more easily, or that you can travel more easily, right? Or like a global health service or a global insurance service, or I don't know. I've been thinking about this for a while. I never found the ideal state service.
I think health is very interesting. If you convince some doctors to actually perform these services, and maybe they don't have to pay VAT or so on, or like not pay, but like they have way less taxation because it's done under the thing of a micronation. It could be a powerful
of a global nation.
It could be a powerful thing.
But so that was just an intro into this week's topic. Tomorrow we'll talk about digital states. We'll look at examples of countries that are going digital, from bad example like El Salvador to interesting ones like Estonia and Taiwan, and what this could mean for global governance.
Are we also exploring digital nation, meaning like similar to micronation but online?
Are you aware of some?
No, I know there are some people that are theorizing them, like
so we can on Wednesday.
Crypto people. Okay. I think it's a very interesting topic, because it's more like, it's more feasible in a way that you don't incur the risk of like being clammed upon by a country or similar. Wonderful. So let's speak tomorrow, same time, and tomorrow is going to be about digital country.
Yay.